Hello, dear friends and colleagues. We are still in the middle of this pandemic, and I get very concerned when I go to social media and I constantly read messages from colleagues or comments from other interpreters where they are talking about situations such as I had to go to work at this deposition or this medical appointment or this social gathering and people were not wearing masks. Or I had to go and do certain things and nobody was masked and I didn't know. Or in the middle of the pandemic, when people are getting COVID 19 left and right nowadays, I am still being forced to go to work and interpret in person. That's very disturbing. And even more disturbing are the comments or the advice from other colleagues when all they tell them is, well, I would suggest that what you do is that you keep your distance when you are working in person. Or that's okay as long as you get an N95 mask and please make sure you wear it at all times. That would be a sound advice if you are going to have some incidental interaction with others in the middle of the pandemic. But to do this as part of your regular professional practice, it's very, very concerning. There are a lot of our colleagues that have been infected with the coronavirus. We know, I think almost all of us by now, somebody, another colleague, or a colleague that knows another colleague that has been infected. Fortunately, a lot of them have made it to the other side relatively without any side effects or long-term problems. And I say this is still questionable because we don't know enough about how long-term these virus effects are going to work to be able to totally and completely assure somebody that this is it, that they overcame the problem. But also, especially lately, we have been very disturbed by hearing how some of our colleagues in different parts of the United States and everywhere else have died of COVID 19 because they have been faced with the problem or with the dilemma of going to work in the middle of the pandemic and do in person interpreting. I think that this is very concerning because at this time, especially now that the pandemic is worse than ever, interpreters should not be required and should not be accepting assignments in person. I can really think of very, very few things where an interpreter would have to work in person at this time. Most work can be done through distance interpreting, whether it is RSI, VRI, or OPI. In reality, most everything can be done this way. Will it be an impeccable situation, a perfect rendition? It will be a very good one, probably not exactly as good as in person, but at this time, what we have to do is we have to save interpreters' lives, we have to save interpreters living for the future, and we have to save one another. We have to protect everybody else in society as well. For this reason, to me, it is extremely disturbing to hear how some interpreters are required to go to work, to hospitals, to courthouses, to detention centers, and elsewhere in the middle of the pandemic. And they have been required to go and do it by their employers. Many times the employer is a government entity, by their employers in the private sector, or by unscrupulous, ignorant agencies who are sending people to do this kind of work under threat that if you don't do it, we probably won't be calling you anymore. To me, that's irresponsible and that is absolutely despicable. There is no need to do this. There is no reason for anybody to do this. I think that this has to change and we have to start by promoting the change. But I wonder why the interpreter unions, I'm talking about labor unions, are not doing anything more important, or they are not showing force at demanding this kind of protections for interpreters. I don't think it's enough for them to require social distancing and few people in the room and maybe that everybody is masked I don't think that's good enough. I think labor unions should be saying at this time, no, interpreters will not be working in person. I wonder where professional associations are also. They've been very silent as well. And yes, there have been some recommendations and guidelines issued here and there. But where is the outrage when you learn that some of our colleagues have died in the middle of the pandemic? And I know and I understand that some of these associations are in the process of putting something out, but I think it's too late. I think it's way too little. So, where have they been? Labor unions, professional associations, government officials, community leaders. There has been a very, very small voice, and there has been practically no outrage. But that's just one part of the problem, and the thing that really concerns me the most, and it's not that these other ones don't concern me, is the one that has to do with the individual interpreter, because that one is under our control. We are at the driver's seat and we can decide what to do about this one. I am really puzzled by interpreters that continue to do this in-person work. I cannot understand why they agree to do it, whether they are staff interpreters or they are freelancers. There should be no reason for this. And I cannot think of any good reason except for very, very few situations, perhaps in the healthcare field, and they are very, very few. In the legal one, I really cannot think of any, and as an example are some of the states and some of the federal courthouses in the United States where everything has gone virtual. I don't understand why it can be done in some places and it can't be done in others. The only logical answer is that in some places they just don't want to do it. And they don't want to do it because they don't want to bother, or because they are ignorant, or because they do not care. But at this point, I think that we have to take action on our own. I invite you to say no. If they ask you, if an agency calls you and tells you there's going to be a deposition or there's a parent-teacher conference in person, you just say, no, I will not take that assignment. Eventually, they will realize that these kind of assignments can be done at a distance and they will accept it. It is not that convenient for the agency, but they are not the ones that are going to suffer the consequences that could even be fatal for attending this kind of event. If you are a freelance interpreter, you are free to work where you want, and therefore you should protect yourself. If you are a staff interpreter, you should say no. And if they sanction you, if they take money from your paycheck, if they take vacation time away, they suspend you or even they fire you, I would say, then take legal action. They cannot do this to you. Even if there are some, like in a few states, regulations or instructions telling people that they have to continue to work. City ordinances in some cities and in some counties are requiring this. Don't worry about that. You have legal recourses. You still have a lot of rights. You still have your civil rights. You still have federal proceedings on your favor, and you have equity on your side. So don't worry about that. Even if they fire you and then they justify that firing, you can still sue them for damages. Just talk to an attorney in that case. But heck, even if you were not be able to, which that's not the case, still quit, still refuse to do it. Find some other ways of interpreting. There are plenty. Will there be less money? Perhaps, at least for now. But again, I know it's very important for many people to work because they go from paycheck to paycheck, and you might start wondering about, well, how am I going to put food on the table for my family, or how am I going to be able to pay my bills unless I go out there and I risk my life every day while I am working, interpreting in person. Please think about this. Saying no at this time, being assertive at this time is what you need. Honestly, right now your health is the most important thing. It's not going to do any good for you to continue to work for a few more weeks or perhaps a couple of months and then get sick and die. your family won't have food on the table, and you will not have a professional future or any other kind of future. At this point, work equals money, and work and money under these conditions equals death. Please don't die, say no. You gotta be assertive and you gotta say no. You have to pick and choose very carefully the work you do. And trust me, work can be done remotely. Explain this to the agency, explain this to the employer, explain this to the government entity. And if they disagree or if they don't want to hear about it, just say no and walk away. Nothing is more important than an interpreter's life. At least that's my opinion. Thank you very much.